Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Baidu. It is time for another update, and on this chart we have been tracking this idea of a larger wave 1 having formed a top within a leading diagonal, and we were looking for a 3-wave correction into the area of support for the wave 2 between the $67 all the way down to the $11.4 level. Now, since we have not yet reached this area of support, it is strongly expected that this correction would extend to lower prices. It does happen at times that we don't actually reach these areas of support, but it is most commonly found within a very impulsive and strong wave 3, where we form these shallow retracements and we don't actually even reach the area of support. So for that reason, I'm still looking for continuation to lower prices, and I'm not finding a bottom to be in place likely at all. Now, within our interpretation, within our structure, it is possible to have the wave 1 top here at the all-time high, but at the same time, I wanted to highlight that a wave 1 top being here at the previous swing high is also a valid interpretation, as we are tracking a diagonal structure, in which case I could consider this to be instead something like an A, B, C pattern to unfold, where this would have been an overshoot within wave B, could be applicable even for WXY. Doesn't really matter for the exact count, but I would be strongly aware that this area of support would be able to adjust slightly in the case of a push to lower prices. Ultimately, the area would start instead at the $58 level, and it would only shift by 60 cents down to the $10.8 level at the last level of support, the 78.6% retracement. I am not able to look for a more bearish long-term interpretation on this chart until we actually break this area of support, the 78.6% retracement at the $10.8 level. Now, in either case, I would be tracking and focusing on the same pattern within this correction momentarily, and here we have this idea of an A, B, C structure that would be expected to unfold and take us into the area of support. As long as we don't break the last level of resistance at the $253.7, the 78.6% retracement, I cannot look with high likelihood at a bottom being possibly in place. Sure, if we break through in a sustained manner, we may need to reconsider our position here on this chart, but currently, as I said, we should be looking still for further continuation to lower prices. Now, internally within this pattern, initially from the swing low in this area, we had already pushed into the area of resistance, and we were looking for a potential direct descent to lower prices within this yellow interpretation for a 1-2 setup. But since we had already broken the area of resistance for such an idea, we were preferring a reset within this correction, within this interpretation in white. And since we have pushed above the beginning of this wave 1 to the downside now, yeah, we have pushed above the $161 level within this extension, we have formally invalidated this interpretation. Now, we will focus strictly on what we were tracking in the previous video, and we will add on to that, and this is the idea of an extension in our larger wave B correction, where I will be tracking an A, B, C pattern to form within this area. In this structure, in the wave C, we were looking for a potential impulse to build, although it is certainly highly debatable what type of pattern unfolds within this area. It is certainly not perfect, but we did hold our area of support provided for the wave 4 correction and extended in the next wave to the upside. We have had very nicely defined levels for continuation higher down to the $110.9 level. We have formed a couple of swings below this area of support, but nothing really sustained that wouldn't allow us to track continuation to higher prices. Now, I want to go through the options we have within this structure, and I do want to highlight that it is perfectly possible, firstly, within this wave C to have a more substantial top in place. Because you see, even though we are able to track an impulse, we would still be looking for continuation to higher prices within an impulse even. It is also possible to track this as an ending diagonal within the wave C, where I could consider this to be a wave 1 top in an ABC pattern, have the wave 2 bottom here instead, track this wave 3 as an ABC pattern itself, and then within this fifth wave we would already have in place a 3-wave pattern, which would allow us to consider this a full count. Now, We will of course have areas of support to track continuation to even higher prices, but I would be extremely cautious as a more significant top could very easily be in place on this chart within this wave C and within this larger wave B, allowing us to look for the larger wave C to take us to much lower prices. We could provide even an ideal target for the idea of such a top being in place, and we would be watching the 100% extension of the wave A around the $34.5 level. Now, of course, it is just that, an ideal target, and we don't necessarily need to get there. Even the 61.8% extension would get us into the area of support, but ultimately, we will have a clear pattern to track within this wave C to the downside. And it is even to this initial level of support and this initial extension at the 61.8% retracement, quite a substantial move already, yeah? We are talking about a 60% drop from the current prices. Now, this is the risk, be aware of it. It is possible that we have formed a top within this wave B and that we are within this large wave to the downside. Now, internally within this structure, I will be looking for extensions in a couple of ways. So we are tracking the idea of an impulse for extensions. Within the idea of a diagonal pattern, I wouldn't even necessarily focus on an area of support for an extension within this fifth wave, but within the idea of an impulse, we have quite a few options even, because I could see this as being an extension even still of this wave 3. In such a case, I would be able to track here a 5-wave move that would be expected to form within this fifth wave before we would have a more significant top only within the wave 3. Although, keep in mind, for this we do need to build a 5-wave pattern within this area. Doesn't need to be an impulse, but it needs to be a 5-wave structure. Now, in terms of this wave, this is what we are going to focus on in either case, but in terms of this pattern, this structure to the upside, we are going to track both the idea of an extension within an impulse that would be invalidated much earlier, but also the idea of an extension within a possible ending diagonal in a fifth wave. Now, for the idea of an impulse, we would need to track here a series of 1-2 setups, which technically is possible, but it's not going to be a very easy assumption to make. We should be prepared for this to not necessarily work out, but here we would have even another 1-2 setup, and this would be our third wave to the upside. In such an interpretation, we can even add here a small count. We would have an area of support for the wave 2 correction between the 23.6% retracement all the way down to the 50% retracement. So we are talking the levels between the $152.7 all the way down to the $139.7. So far, so good. We have gotten into the area of support and we might even be able to form a substantial bottom already, but we don't have any evidence as of yet. Now, for the idea of an ending diagonal, I would probably focus on tracking this as a 1-2 setup instead, and I would not necessarily consider that this is a third wave complete, because it is actually quite difficult to track this as only a 3-wave pattern. It is generally much easier to track those, but in this case I would probably even prefer that this would be an A wave if we are to extend to higher prices. In either case, I would be tracking the area of support for such an interpretation because I would not be able to discard continuation to higher prices before we break the 78.6% retracement for such a pattern. And now, in such a case, we would be watching the levels that heavily overlap here with the area of support in green, but it is between the $145 all the way down to the $127 level. Below the 78.6% retracement would be a strong signal that even the idea of an ending diagonal forming within this area is very weak and is likely going to fail, meaning that we should expect a more substantial top to be in place within this wave B, because we would have failed to create a 5-wave pattern within this movement to the upside. And to be clear, it is still possible, as I mentioned earlier, to extend within an ABC pattern, still within the idea of a larger ending diagonal, but I would not find this a likely scenario, and I will not even track an area of support for this. For continuation higher, I will be looking for a potential initial 5-wave move to the upside. We can, if we form here 1, 2, 3, 4th and 5th from this correction, even from lower prices, look for potential continuation higher, but until such is the case, we are only watching the areas of support for continuation within the idea of a larger impulse that could form here. And for now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover. And I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.